Greetings, dear friends. Your invaluable support is our strength. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. This greatly helps the growth of our channel. Leave your comments. Your feedback is very valuable to us. And now, to the most important and current world events. Let's go.
The Minister of Defense of Saudi Arabia, Prince Khalid bin Salman, has arrived in Tehran. The visit takes place against the backdrop of negotiations between Tehran and Washington on the Iranian nuclear program. The IRNA agency reported that the prince discussed expanding relations in the field of defense and regional cooperation to strengthen peace and stability, as well as combating terrorism. On RBC, the main news in the studio with Sergei Krasnov. Hello. Peace talks on Ukraine have begun in Paris. The special envoy of the U.S. President, Steve Witkoff, and the head of the State Department, Marco Rubio, have arrived there. They met with the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and in a smaller format, the Foreign Minister, Jean-Manuel Barrot. And the British government's National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, also participated. The Elysee Palace did not disclose the details. Additionally, Witkoff and Rubio are currently meeting separately with European diplomats. Representatives from Ukraine were also invited. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, head of Zelensky's office Andriy Yermak, and Defense Minister Rustem Umerov arrived. It is noted that the atmosphere is quite lively, all participants are in good spirits, but there are no details yet. Meanwhile, Reuters points out that Europe is concerned about the U.S. attempts to improve relations with Moscow. After meeting with Vladimir Putin, Stephen Witkoff reported that an agreement is being planned, and noted that the key topics are the 5 regions already included in Russia, as well as the issue of NATO's presence in Ukraine. He suggested to Trump to support Moscow's right to new territories, as this would be the quickest path to peace. And here's what the special representative of the President of Russia, head of the RDIF Kirill Dmitriev, who participated in the meeting in St. Petersburg, said about the results today.
The meeting was extremely productive. As I have said before, many people, organizations and countries are trying to disrupt our dialogue with the United States. There is very active propaganda against Russia in the United States across various mass media. Therefore, it is very important to convey the Russian position directly. And undoubtedly this was done, and a very useful dialogue is taking place. It is certainly happening under very difficult conditions, amidst constant attacks and misinformation. Therefore, the fact that there is a direct dialogue is extremely important.
The European Central Bank has lowered the key interest rate by 0.25 percentage point for the 7th time in 10 months, and it now stands at 2.4% per annum. Incidentally, 2 other rates have been reduced by the same amount.
The Governing Council today decided to lower the 3. The Governing Council today decided 3. The Governing Council today decided to lower the 3 key ECB interest rates by 25 basis points. The decision is based on our updated assessment of the inflation forecast, its dynamics, and the effectiveness of the monetary policy being implemented.
The process of reducing inflation is in full swing.
On this news, the euro exchange rate momentarily rose to a 3-year high against the dollar. It became 14 cents above parity. And another important point, the regulator no longer states that the policy remains restrictive. The statement says that the ECB is determined to ensure inflation stabilizes at no more than 2%. The President of the United States called for the resignation of the head of the Federal Reserve. Donald Trump stated that Jerome Powell should take a cue from the European Central Bank. In the States, it's long overdue to move towards lowering the key rate, but Powell is not planning to do so. Jerome Powell from the Federal Reserve, who is always late and always wrong, published a report that was yet another typical complete mess. Oil prices are falling, groceries, even eggs are getting cheaper. And the U.S. is getting richer from tariffs. It's already too late to lower interest rates, as the ECB is doing. And for a long time. But he should certainly lower them now. Powell's resignation? The sooner the better. The fact is, servicing a national debt of almost $37 trillion is becoming increasingly difficult. And this year, $11 trillion needs to be refinanced. And the lower the rate, the better for the U.S. government. Well, the head of the Federal Reserve himself spoke at the Chicago Economic Club the day before, and stated there that the regulator will not rush in matters of monetary policy.
of households and businesses report a sharp decline. Surveys of households and businesses show a sharp decline in sentiment and increased uncertainty. The level of tariff increases is significantly higher than expected. Tariffs are likely to cause inflation to rise, and it may become more persistent. Our duty is to ensure that this does not become a permanent issue. Without stable prices, we cannot achieve favorable labor market conditions that benefit all Americans.
Experts at Renaissance Macro believe that the likelihood of a recession in the United States is becoming much higher, as there is no expectation of a Fed rate cut in the near future. In the U.S., the Department of Commerce reported strong sales for March. But the reason for this is that Americans rushed to purchase cars and household appliances before the new tariffs were implemented. In fact, consumer sentiment has fallen to the second lowest level in history. Futures on American stocks rose amid optimism regarding Trump's trade negotiations with Japan. The U.S. president personally participated in them and stated that significant progress has been made in deal-making. However, he did not specify what exactly. A representative from Tokyo stated that there is no certainty yet, and there will be another round.
I said that the tariff measures of the United States are deeply regrettable, explaining the negative impact on Japanese investments and personnel. He persistently asked the USA to reconsider a number of tariff measures. Negotiations with Japan are undoubtedly a priority for the USA. Trump says that there are 70 or 100 countries in line, and his presence at the negotiations is a clear sign of their importance. We would like to conclude the negotiations as quickly as possible, but we do not yet know how everything will progress.
Japan's negotiator, Ryusei Kazawa, first spoke with Trump for 50 minutes, and then with U.S. ministers for another 75 minutes. He noted that currency policy was not discussed, which dispelled concerns that Washington would insist on a stronger exchange rate, yen. The negotiations are being closely watched, as they will provide insight into how the U.S. plans to build relationships with partners. The U.S. administration intends to put pressure on other countries during the negotiations so that they limit trade with China. Bloomberg points this out. For example, Mexican officials expect that Washington will demand an increase in tariffs on the import of Chinese electric vehicles. Trump's chief economic advisors are discussing the possibility of asking representatives from other countries to impose secondary tariffs, essentially financial sanctions, on imports from certain countries with close ties to China. The U.S. also wants its trading partners to reduce their purchases of Chinese goods. This is an attempt to block China and increase pressure on Beijing, but it is unclear whether this strategy will yield results. Support from European and Asian countries will be needed, as they do not want to drastically cut ties with China. The Supreme Court has suspended the ban on the activities of the Taliban movement in Russia, and as the judge stated, the decision is subject to immediate execution. The Taliban was included in the Unified Federal List of organizations recognized as terrorist 22 years ago because the movement maintained ties with illegal armed groups in the Caucasus and used methods of terror. At that time, Osama bin Laden and his followers aimed to seize power in Central Asian states, including Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Well, now the session was held behind closed doors, so the motivation for the new decision is unknown. But according to the law, the ban on activities can be suspended if the organization has ceased promoting extremism and terrorism. Approximately 4 years ago, the Taliban ascended to power in Afghanistan, and experts note that establishing relations is necessary to secure Russia's border with Central Asia.
The decision is dictated by Russia's desire to restore relations with Afghanistan for several reasons. The main one is to maintain contact with all forces that might pose, among other things, a terrorist threat to Mayakova under Brayushi, so to speak, primarily for Tajikistan and other Central Asian countries. If the Afghan authorities can hold back the pressure, the remaining Islamists who do not head towards Central Asia, that will already be a positive result. Many speak of economic cooperation, particularly in light of the prospects for developing the so-called logistics corridor, north-south, through Afghanistan to the seaports of Pakistan. Well, there's a 5,000-kilometer railway that still needs to be built, and it's quite a labor-intensive task. Perhaps it's not possible to look so far ahead.
Russia signed an agreement with Qatar to create an investment platform worth $2 billion. Additionally, a memorandum of understanding on the development of financial management systems and an agreement on cooperation in the field of healthcare have been adopted. The ceremony took place in the Kremlin after the talks between Vladimir Putin and the Emir of the Arab monarchy. The Qatari Investment Fund has already invested more than $13 billion in the Russian economy. The main share is in the energy, banking and trade sectors. Moscow and Qatar are strengthening ties through the Russian Direct Investment Fund, noted Putin.
Qatar is one of the key partners of our leading oil and gas company, Rosneft. Through the Russian Direct Investment Fund, more than about $1 billion have been invested in our economy. I am confident there are many more prospects. We have many interesting projects, quite enough. We are effectively cooperating in the organization of gas exporters, and I expect there will be interesting joint projects here. We are engaged in the field of humanitarian cooperation.
Qatar is the third country in the world in terms of natural gas reserves and a major oil supplier, part of OPEC. They also actively cooperate in the field of transport. The tourist flow of Russians to Qatar last year increased and grew by almost a quarter to 109,000 trips.
Qatar is an important strategic partner for Russia in the Persian Gulf. Along with the growth of the country's economy, the demand for resources, goods, technologies, and competencies is increasing, and Russian business is ready to meet this demand. Traditionally, we export agricultural and food products to Qatar. Over the past 5 years, the volume of deliveries has increased in physical terms.